Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. We start today's satsang with a prayer by Srimati Sapna Ganesh, which will be followed by Muktaka trayam Pathanam by Sri Nandakumarji.
दक्षिणामूर्तिसारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमां रमणाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां शुक्लां वरदरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये आङ्गिकं भुवनं यस्य वाचिकं सर्ववाङ्मयम् आहार्यं चन्द्रतारादि तं नमः सात्विकं शिवम् ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय. Namo Ramana to everyone.
एकम् अक्षरम् हृदि निरन्तरम् भासते स्वयं लिख्यते कथम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वता मज्जता पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम् देहं ब्रह्मयवत् जडात्मकम् अहं बुद्धिर्न तस्याप्यतो नाहं तत्तभावशुक्तिसमये कोऽहं भावयुतः कुतो दृष्टात्मनष्टात्मना सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचलशिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं सोऽहं शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं. नमो रमण.
Namo Ramana. We will now have the chanting of Upadesa Saram by Uma and Ashwini Balaji.
Namo Ramana. वायुरोधनात् क्रियते मणिमूलका लयविनाशने उभयरोदने लयगतं पुनर्भवति नोमृतम् प्राणबन्धनात् क्लीनमानसम् एकचिन्तना नाशमेत्यद नष्टमानसो उत्कृष्टयोगिना कृत्यमस्ति किं स्वस्तितिं यथा दृश्यवारितं चित्तमात्मना चित्वदर्शनं तत्त्वदर्शनं मानसं तु किं मार्गणे कृते नैव मानसं मार्ग आर्जवात् वृत्तयस्त्वहं वृत्तिमाश्रिताः वृत्तयो मनो विद्यहं मनः अहमयं कुतो भवति चिन्वत ऐपतत्यहं निजविचारणम् अहमिनाशभाज्यहमहं तया स्फुरतिर्स्वयं परमपूर्णसत्. नमो रमण.
Namo Ramana. We will now have the presentations of Ramananjali Sangeetam by Srimati V.Radha along with Vallabh, and this will be followed by another presentation by Revathi Shankar, and then a presentation by Savitri Krishnan, Jaisriram Krishnan, and Srimati Jaisri.
Namo Ramana to all. Today we will be presenting a song written by Dr. Sarada, and the music is by Sri L. Krishnan. கருணை கடலே பொங்கி இன்ப அலைகள் ஆடுதே, கருணை கடலே பொங்கி இன்ப அலைகள் ஆடுதே, ரமணா 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 என்று கானம் பாடுதே, ரமணா 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 என்று கானம் பாடுதே, கருணை கடலே பொங்கி இன்ப அலைகள் ஆடுதே, ரமணா 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 என்று கானம் பாடுதே. அங்கும் இங்கும் தங்க ரமணன் அழகே தோன்றுதே, அங்கும் இங்கும் தங்க ரமணன் அழகே தோன்றுதே, மங்களங்கள் என்று வாழ்வில் நிலைக்க செய்யுதே, மங்களங்கள் என்று வாழ்வில் நிலைக்க செய்யுதே, அங்கும் இங்கும் தங்க ரமணன் அழகே தோன்றுதே, மங்களங்கள் என்று வாழ்வில் நிலைக்க செய்யுதே, ஜகமெல்லாம் அருளாலே மலர்கின்றதே, ஜகமெல்லாம் அருளாலே மலர்கின்றதே, எங்குமே பேரன்பின் மனம் வீசுதே, எங்குமே பேரன்பின் மனம் வீசுதே, ஜகமெல்லாம் அருளாலே மலர்கின்றதே, எங்குமே பேரன்பின் மனம் வீசுதே, கருணை கடலே பொங்கி இன்ப அலைகள் ஆடுதே, கருணை கடலே பொங்கி இன்ப அலைகள் ஆடுதே, ரமணா 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 என்று கானம் பாடுதே, ரமணா 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 என்று கானம் பாடுதே, அங்கும் எங்கும் தங்க ரமணன் அழகே தோன்றுதே, மங்களங்கள் என்று வாழ்வில் நிலைக்க செய்யுதே, ஜகமெல்லாம் அருளாலே மலர்கின்றதே, எங்குமே பேரன்பின் மனம் வீசுதே, எங்குமே பேரன்பின் மனம் வீசுதே, எங்குமே பேரன்பின் மனம் வீசுதே. ரமணா 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 ரமணா. நமோ ரமணா.
Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Bhagavan has come on this earth in the form of a light, and this light is infinite and it doesn't have any space limitation. It doesn't have an end or it doesn't have a beginning. When that light doesn't have an end or a beginning, and that light shines in our heart, it means that we are also the beginningless and endless light. And this light, when it is shining bright within us, there is no death, there is no birth. And when we realize this, that is the Lingodbhava, that is Arunachala within our heart, shining bright. I present to you a song written by Sadhu Swami, a Kannada translation of the same. ಆದಿಯಂತ್ಯಗಳು ಇಲ್ಲದ ಲಿಂಗ ರಮಣ ರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಲಿಂಗ. ಆದಿಯಂತ್ಯಗಳು ಇಲ್ಲದ ಲಿಂಗ ರಮಣ ರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಲಿಂಗ. ಆದಿಯಂತ್ಯಗಳು ಇಲ್ಲದ ಲಿಂಗ ಹರಿಬ್ರಹ್ಮ ನೋಡಿದ ಅಗ್ನಿಲಿಂಗ. ಜ್ಯೋತಿ ಸದಾಶಿವ ಜ್ಯೋತಿರ್ಲಿಂಗ ಸೂಕ್ಷ್ಮಾತ್ಮ ಸ್ವರೂಪದ ಲಿಂಗ. ಅರ್ಧನಾರೀಶ್ವರ ಈ ಶಿವಲಿಂಗ ಮಾರ್ಗಶಿರದಲ್ಲಿ ಉದ್ಭವಲಿಂಗ. ಅರ್ಧನಾರೀಶ್ವರ ಈ ಶಿವಲಿಂಗ ಮಾರ್ಗಶಿರದಲ್ಲಿ ಉದ್ಭವಲಿಂಗ. ನಾದ ಸ್ವರೂಪ ಈಶ್ವರಲಿಂಗ ರಮಣ ರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲಲಿಂಗ. ನಾದ ಸ್ವರೂಪ ಈಶ್ವರಲಿಂಗ ರಮಣ ರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲಲಿಂಗ. ಆದಿಯಂತ್ಯಗಳು ಇಲ್ಲದ ಲಿಂಗ ರಮಣ ರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲಲಿಂಗ. ಸುಂದರ ಸುವರ್ಣ ಶೋಭಿತಲಿಂಗ ಶುದ್ಧ ಮನದಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಖೋಧವಲಿಂಗ. ಸುಂದರ ಸುವರ್ಣ ಶೋಭಿತಲಿಂಗ ಶುದ್ಧ ಮನದಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಖೋಧವಲಿಂಗ. ಸುರನರ ಪೂಜಿತ ಸುರುಚಿರಲಿಂಗ ಜನನ ಮರಣ ವಿಮುಕ್ತಿದಲಿಂಗ. ಸುರನರ ಪೂಜಿತ ಸುರುಚಿರಲಿಂಗ ಜನನ ಮರಣ ವಿಮುಕ್ತಿದಲಿಂಗ. ಬಂಧ ವಿಮೋಚಕ ಈ ಶಿವಲಿಂಗ ಯೋಗಿ ಜನಾನಂದ ಈ ಶಿವಲಿಂಗ. ಬಂಧ ವಿಮೋಚಕ ಈ ಶಿವಲಿಂಗ ಯೋಗಿ ಜನಾನಂದ ಈ ಶಿವಲಿಂಗ. ಈ ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ ಪವಿತ್ರ ಲಿಂಗ ರಮಣ ರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲಲಿಂಗ. ಈ ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ ಪವಿತ್ರ ಲಿಂಗ ರಮಣ ರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲಲಿಂಗ. ಆದಿಯಂತ್ಯಗಳು ಇಲ್ಲದ ಲಿಂಗ ರಮಣ ರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲಲಿಂಗ. ಆದಿಯಂತ್ಯಗಳು ಇಲ್ಲದ ಲಿಂಗ ರಮಣ ರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲಲಿಂಗ. ರಮಣ ರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲಲಿಂಗ. ರಮಣ ರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲಲಿಂಗ.
ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಭಕ್ತರ ಹೃದಯ ಪ್ರದೀಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಭಕ್ತರ ಹೃದಯ ಪ್ರದೀಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವರೂಪ ಯೋಗಿರಾಜನೇ ಸೂರ್ಯ ತೇಜನೆ ಭಾವೋನ್ಮಾದದ ಕಾರಣನೆ ಯೋಗಿರಾಜನೇ ಸೂರ್ಯ ತೇಜನೆ ಭಾವೋನ್ಮಾದದ ಕಾರಣನೆ ನಿನ್ನಯ ಸನ್ನಿಧಿ ಶಾಂತಿಯ ವಾರಿಧಿ ನಿನ್ನಯ ಸನ್ನಿಧಿ ಶಾಂತಿಯ ವಾರಿಧಿ ತಾಪಸಿಗಳ ಭೂಷಣನೇ ತಾಪಸಿಗಳ ಭೂಷಣನೇ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಭಕ್ತರ ಹೃದಯ ಪ್ರದೀಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವರೂಪ ಜಪ ತಪಗಾಗಿ ಹಿಮಾದ್ರಿಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ತಾಪದೆ ಬಳಲಿದ ಯೋಗಿ ಜನ ಜಪ ತಪಗಾಗಿ ಹಿಮಾದ್ರಿಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ತಾಪದೆ ಬಳಲಿದ ಯೋಗಿ ಜನ ಕರುಣೆಯ ಕಂಬ ಜ್ಯೋತಿಯ ಬಿಂಬ ಕರುಣೆಯ ಕಂಬ ಜ್ಯೋತಿಯ ಬಿಂಬ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ತೋರಿಸು ಆ ಸುದಿನ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ತೋರಿಸು ಆ ಸುದಿನ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಭಕ್ತರ ಹೃದಯ ಪ್ರದೀಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವರೂಪ ದೇವಾದಿಗಳು ಧಾವಿಸಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತಪವನು ಗೈದರು ಶಾಂತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ದೇವಾದಿಗಳು ಧಾವಿಸಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತಪವನು ಗೈದರು ಶಾಂತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಮಹಿಮಾದ್ರಿಯ ಮಹೋನ್ನತೆ ಸಾರಲು ಮಹಿಮಾದ್ರಿಯ ಮಹೋನ್ನತೆ ಸಾರಲು ಶಿವಮೈ ತಾಳಿದ ಭೂಮಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅರುಣಾಚಲದ ರೂಪಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಭಕ್ತರ ಹೃದಯ ಪ್ರದೀಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಗುರು ರಮಣ ನೀನೇ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವರೂಪ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವರೂಪ ಓಂ ನಮೋ ಭಗವತೆ ಶ್ರೀರಾಮಾಯ
Namo Ramana. We will now have the reading and sharing of the book Forever is in the Now by Sri Nandakumarji.
Namo Ramana. In this, our book reading segment of the satsang, we continue our gleanings from Forever is in the Now the timeless message of Sri Ramana Maharshi, edited and compiled by our founder president, Sri A.R. Natarajan. We have been going through the article contributed by M.A. Pigot, The Way of the Spirit. She is introduced as the first lady visitor from the West to Sri Ramanashramam. We are nearing the end of that narrative. I just go back a few paragraphs for the sake of continuity. The author asks Bhagavan, is it necessary? But in trying to still the mind, I am likely to fall asleep. But in trying to still the mind, I am likely to fall asleep. Bhagavan says, put yourself into the condition as in deep sleep. Then watch. Be asleep consciously instead of unconsciously. There will be then only one consciousness. As the days passed, I saw more and more clearly that this was no theoretical philosophy. He himself lived it continuously and joyously. He was one of the few I have met who were not only happy but untroubled. Not that the sorrows of the world left him untouched. On the contrary, but he knew where they belonged and was not identified with them. To any sufferer, his compassion was unlimited. One day, a man rushed in and flung himself face down before the Maharishi in a paroxysm of weeping. Great sobs tore his body. The Maharishi said nothing, and no one else dared. I watched the Maharishi. His head was turned aside and he seemed indifferent. After some little time, the violence of the man's grief subsided and gradually he became quiet. Still, no one spoke. Then at last, reverently, the man rose and made a deep salutation. The Maharishi turned his head and smiled upon him. I felt suddenly as if all the flowers of the world had poured their fragrance into our midst. Another time, a poor person who had been bitten by a snake was brought in and laid before him. We all watched, fear gripping our hearts. Not so he, who sat looking into the far distance while the victim writhed in pain. Calm and compassion was in that look and infinite peace. After what seemed like hours, the twitching ceased and the man appeared to sleep. Then the one who had brought in the sufferer gently touched him. The man rose, prostrated himself before the Maharishi, and went out cured. But this was unusual. The Maharishi did not heal in the accepted term of the word. Talking about it one day, I asked him if one could use spiritual power for healing. He remarked, yes, if you think it worthwhile, but added that it required a great deal of force which might be used more profitably in other directions. We of course know Bhagavan's importance to not wasting. Obviously, the spiritual power of tapas is not to be wasted, is very clear. Bhagavan would actually condemn people who wouldn't take the food prepared out of previous day's sambar because of some religious considerations. And Bhagavan would say, all those ethics do not stand before the ethic of not wasting. So here Bhagavan is saying to M.A. Pigot, it may be used, the spiritual power may be used for healing, but that requires a lot of force and is to be used very carefully if the possessor of that power thinks it worthwhile. That afternoon, I had my farewell talk with the Maharishi. He was so gentle and human. We discussed the difficulties of everyday life and mundane problems. I asked again about the relation of the body to the eye. He gave this simile. You came up from the bungalow this morning in a cart. Yet you do not say, the cart came up. You say, I came up. You did not make the mistake of identifying yourself with the cart. In the same way, look upon your body as you do the cart. Treat it well, and it will be a good servant and instrument. But do not be deceived into thinking it is I. He again stressed the necessity to see only the self in everything. Act automatically, so to speak, and let it do the work. Let it is given in inverted commas, do the work. And it always will, he added. Do not look for results. Do what is right in the given moment and leave it behind you. At the end of our talk, he quoted the wonderful saying from the Upanishad, when to the man who understands, the self has become all things. What sorrow, what trouble can there be to him who has once beheld this unity? Once one has beheld this Purana, where all the three, Jagat, Aham, Para, are all rolled into one, then everything is that. Oneself and everything is rolled into that Spurana. What can such a one ask or try to attain? I'll read that quote from the Upanishad again. At the end of our talk, Bhagavan quoted that wonderful saying from the Upanishad. When to the man who understands the self has become all things. What sorrow, what trouble can there be to him who has once beheld this unity? As I went to say goodbye in the evening, the ashram people clustered around in sympathy for my departure. I felt I had made and was living true friends. They were so simple and yet so genuine. There was a service taking place in the adjoining temple, and an old Sanskrit hymn was being chanted. Just as I stepped into the cart, the temple bell rang. This brought a smile of happiness on everyone's face. Apparently, to hear a temple gong in the act of departure is a wonderful omen and brings peace. We go on to the reading of the next article, contributed by N.N. Rajan. N.N. Rajan is author of Ramana Dhyanam and Bloom of Inner Glory. His leaves from the diary are being serialized in the Ramana way. Down Memory Lane by N.N. Rajan. A week before Jayanti or Mahapuja. That is the subtitle for the paragraph given. A week before Bhagavan's Jayanti or Mahapuja, the article goes on like this. A week before the Mahapuja or Ramana Jayanti, many of the devotees from far and near would assemble at Sri Ramanashramam. In the afternoon session, many lively discussions would go on among the prominent devotees, G.V. Subbaramaya, Devraj Mudaliar, T.P.R., Venkatakrishnaya, and Balarama Reddy would be more conspicuous. One can say that even before these special functions, Bhagavan would be more radiant with enchanting smile and an effulgence which can be compared only to the rising sun. One can say that even before these special functions, Bhagavan would be more radiant with enchanting smile and an effulgence which can be compared only to the rising sun. The atmosphere would be suffused with divine aroma. Bhagavan's court in the old hall would excel even the heavenly court of Indra. Discussions would only be on spiritual subjects. G.V. Subramanya would move closely with Bhagavan, but with devotion and reverence. Bhagavan would also be more free. He would sometimes joyously narrate some instances from his boyhood days and also the life in the hall. Most interesting episodes would figure. Bhagavan talked with gestures, signs, lowering his voice or raising it with apt pauses, which would be very captivating. His description would bring before our mind's eye the scene which he was enacting. Any amount of description cannot do full justice to this joyous and unforgettable sight of Bhagavan and his narration. GVS would often lead some discussion. Once he asked Bhagavan about the state of realization. Bhagavan said, "Why say only some persons are realized? All are realized, but they do not know. All are realized, but they do not know that. That is the difference. All are jnanis." And so Bhagavan continued. With GVS leading, we used to repeat Bhagavan's words amongst ourselves, all are jnanis, and laugh. Though it would appear as fun to us because of our ignorance, there is little doubt that in Bhagavan's eyes, there are no ajnanis. When we were enjoying ourselves, Bhagavan would also laugh spontaneously. Mahapuja, Ramana Jayanti, general note. During Mahapuja and Ramana Jayanti celebrations, a large number of people would congregate every year, both from nearby and distant places, with much enthusiasm and devotion. Many of them would be familiar to Bhagavan. There would always also be some newcomers and visitors. Bhagavan would be plunged in deep stillness with added effulgence. The luster of his countenance used to be such that people would hesitate even to go near him and speak to him. Such would be the tranquility of his presence that some visitors from outstation would be reluctant to leave the ashram. Some, however, would leave the same night or the next morning. During these occasions, it would be of special interest to know the way Bhagavan conducted himself. Naturally, countless visitors would come to Bhagavan to take leave of him before their departure. They would attach great importance to it. Even so, it would not be possible for Bhagavan to acknowledge or nod his consent to each and every one. Sometimes he would be sitting with a faraway look or with closed eyes. The casual visitors and some others would move away quickly. But those who were familiar with Bhagavan's ways would mentally pray and prostrate before leaving. The object, of course, was not to disturb Bhagavan, but to somehow receive his blessing. Occasionally, as an exception to long-time devotees from far-off places, Bhagavan would speak a few words and give necessary instructions at the time of leave-taking. Group discussions. K.S. Narayanaswamy Iyer, Valandur Kalyanasundaram Iyer, and I used to have discussions about Bhagavan's statements and narrations. Sometimes we would sit up late, even up to midnight. Bhagavan's description of Manolaya and Manonasha is one of the subjects discussed. In Manolaya, the stillness is only temporary, and the tendencies of the mind would soon externalize the mind. So attempt should be made to pursue Manonasha. In it only is there bliss. By enquiry only can the mind be destroyed. Prolonged laya will lead only to yoga nidra and not the nasha of the mana. Hence the paramount need for self-enquiry with Shraddha. I'll read those two sentences again. Prolonged laya will lead only to yoga nidra and not the nasha of mana. Hence the paramount need for self-enquiry with Shraddha. Even Nirvikalpa Samadhi is not the ultimate. On getting out of it, movement of the mind and breath will be there. What is needed is Sahaja Samadhi. A person in that state has no sense of doership. Even if he is engaged in action, it is only in the eyes of the others. If the mind is obliterated, what remains? Where is Prarabdha? Kesan was consuming only milk and fruits. He thought Bhagavan would appreciate this. But it was not really so. Bhagavan told him, you should not take any woe in that way. Whatever is easily available, you should eat that. The principle to remember is only moderation in food. Note general. When there were any important references, letters, press matters, or photocopies, the Sarvadhikari occasionally used to send them for Bhagavan's perusal through me. I would take the matter to the hall or the dining hall. I would handle the papers with all reverence and fear. I would be very conscious that my fingers should not come into contact with his fingers or any part of his body. On the other hand, Bhagavan would freely move his hands without hesitation. At times his fingers would touch mine, and the palm also touch mine, while I was always careful to avoid actual contact out of reverence. Even though it would be a chance blessing, I would have my fear. Where is my lowest position when compared to his supreme state? There are many mystics who say it is always better to keep still in front of the great ones and in front of God in self-enquiry. There, when God himself moves and embraces, that is the real union, say many mystics. And this reverence of Rajan, we are able to understand. His keeping still, Bhagavan's hand itself moves and touches him. At times his finger would touch mine and the palm also touched mine, while I was always careful to avoid actual contact out of reverence. Even though it would be a chance blessing, I would have my fear. Where is my lowest position when compared to his supreme state? This chance contact would be thrilling to my whole physical frame through every pore. I'll read that. This chance contact would be thrilling to my whole physical frame through every pore. Unmindful of his divine status, he would act freely like this. It is really marvelous. His equal vision, which considered that no one was inferior to him. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Bhagavan himself has written in Aksharamanamalai, no kiye karidi me takiye pakkuvam, takine aandarul Arunachala. Like that, Rajan sir has written about the touch and the beautiful touch which Bhagavan has given in all our lives is self-enquiry. Let us have that touch now by Sri Dileep Simha, who will be conducting the self-enquiry session.
Namo Ramana. Dhyayet Sharada Chandra Sundaramukam Tamraravindekshanam Bhaktabhishtavarabhayapradakaram Kaupinamatrojvalam Svatmanandarasanubhuti Sarvanavadyangakam श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रं यहमहमिति साक्षातात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामच्युतव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. We will commence today's Atma Vicharan by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesha. I'll be reading from the book Guru Vachaka Kovai from the chapter Meditation on the Truth. And the topic is knowledge and ignorance. Verse number 543. Though the sesame seeds poured into the large mortar of a revolving oil press are many, the oil present in them is one and the same. Similarly, though the external universe appears as multiple, diverse objects, their inner essence, the reality, is only one. I repeat, though the sesame seeds poured into the large mortar of a revolving oil press are many, the oil present in them is one and the same. Similarly, though the external universe appears as multiple, diverse objects, their inner essence, the reality, is only one. As Nandakumarji read out in Natarajanji's Bhagavan's input to all of us, that there is only one self, and therefore everybody is realized. There is none who can say that they are not realized. If you were to simply take ourself, the sun that has been shining forever. It was there when Bhagavan was there, it was there when Rama was there, it was there when Jesus was there, and we are able to see the same thing. Similarly, the space that provided was there, but the self which cognizes all of that is very much there within all of us, which continues to cognize even now. As Bhagavan would say, Shakespeare as the self wrote it so that we as the self can enjoy that. So it is only the self that which alone remains, and everything may be coming and going, but the self doesn't go through any change. And it is the self which is like the oil in the sesame seed. If you look at the seed, we may say that each seeds are different, but the essence, the oil, is the same. And Bhagavan would say the stone on which we are sitting is also having consciousness. There is therefore one truth which is connecting all of us. And our objective is not to get carried away how that truth appears in these various forms. Our essence is to see that one truth which is the essential cause or support of everything. And for that, Bhagavan has given us Atma Vicharam. He says, whenever our mind gets carried away by the numerous division of objects in the form of thoughts, because it initially starts there, he asks us to diligently inquire, to whom is this thought? Thereupon, it becomes clear this thought is for me. And when we inquire, who am I? What do I refer to as I within me? Or where from this I thought rises within me? And when we inquire, we are taken to that self, the pure being consciousness, which ever is shining as I within all of us. And by that recognition, we see that the division is absorbed and that one unity alone is. And by repeated practice of that, Bhagavan assures that the mind will gain enough strength to remain at that unity. That is what was called as the Sahaja Samadhi. And in that natural abidance alone, everything is seen as unity, or everything is seen without any division, because there is none in that truth. And it is not a mental exercise to see unity. Bhagavan says it is the natural state of the self that we see unity in everything, and therefore, by inquiring and by repeatedly getting back to our natural state, then it rises and shines, the unity rises and shines automatically. And for that, Bhagavan has given us Atma Vichara, with the immense grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path. Let us inquire to Atma Vichara for the next 10 minutes. In inquiry, no matter how many thoughts rise, and no matter whatever may be the nature of the thought, good, bad, ugly, or even spiritual, we have to only inquire, to whom is this? And we recognize it is for me. Thereupon, when we inquire, who am I? And get back to the source of that I thought, or whatever we refer to as I within us, then and there, the mind which was outward turned is turned back and absorbed in the self by the grace of the Master. And with repeated practice, Bhagavan assures that the mind will gain enough strength to remain at the source. For the next 10 minutes, let us do Atma Vicharam. Shri Ramanaya.
We will now have the sharing of Mananams by Venkatesh Deshpande ji on Guru Stuti.
Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviram Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Dhyanamoolam Guror Murti Pujamulam Guror Padam Mantramulam Gurur Vakyam Mokshamulam Gurur Kripaha. Namo Ramana. We are doing manana on the Shankara's Digvijaya, canto number 10, which Bhagavan calls as the Guru Stuti. So, what we had done the first two verses. The first verse basically talked about we have to carefully apply the scriptural text of not this, neti, neti. So that was the first verse. Second verse was that the truth, after generating the fundamentals and entering the world, lies hidden beneath the 5 sheets. So that was the second verse. So today we will do manana on the third verse. And I request Sapna to kindly chant the verse, please.
Yes, sir. Vishama Vishayeshu Sancharinokshashvan Dosha Darshanakashabhitya Tataha Svairam Samnivartya Svantarashmi Bhirdhira Badnanti Yatra Tattvamasi Tattvam. Vishama Vishayeshu Sancharinokshashvan Dosha Darshanakashabhitya Tataha Svairam Samnivartya Svantarashmi Bhirdhira Badnanti Yatra Tattvamasi Tattvam. Thank you, sir.
Just as wild horses are broken in by whipping and stabling them, so also the unruly senses, straying among objects, are lashed by the whip of discrimination, showing that objects are unreal, and are tethered by the rope of pure intellect to the self by the wise. Such is the truth that thou art. So this is beautifully said in Shankara Digvijaya. Also, it is beautifully said. The senses are like wild horses running uncontrolled along dangerous paths. The wise ones try to bring them under control with a whip of insight into the evil consequences of sense enjoyment, and with the reins of discriminative thoughts, they tie them to the all-controlling self, the truth declared by the saying, "Thou art that within." So let us try and understand what is this all about. You know, the sense, and we always want to control the mind and how to do it. And typically, we have the 10 senses, the jnanendriyas and karmendriyas, the organs of sensation and the organs of action, and we want to control them. So let's try and see how we can do it. Now, typically what people think is repression or suppression of brings about brings about good results. But that's not the point. The senses become formidable and turbulent if you repress them or suppress them. So what is wanted is sublimation of the senses through proper and good use, but not repression or suppression. So the senses can be thinned down. So the senses have got to be thinned down by pranayama, vairagya, yaga, meditation, reduction of wants, control of desires. So these are different methods that are prescribed to thin down the senses. The senses are very, very strong. Let's look at some of the methods that can be used to bring their senses under control. So one thing, it is in a day, it is a patient, continuous struggle. So this is a very, very important thing. We are used to these T20 matches nowadays. We want immediate results. In 20 overs, we want to get the results. But Bhagavan says it is a patient, continuous, we have to plod on with patience and perseverance. Satsanga, that's what we are having right now, gives strength and helps to control them efficiently. Above all, God's grace is very necessary. Moksha Moolam Gurur Prabha. Obtain this through surrender, faith, and devotion. So let us try and see how do we control this, or we sublimate these indriyas. Now, what is indriyas? Now, we let us try and quickly understand what the indriyas are. Indriyas are basically objectified desires. Will to see is the eye, will to hear is the ear. The indriyas, the senses, have two states. One is a static state and one is a dynamic state. When the desire begins to operate, the indriyas are put into motion. This is the dynamic state. As soon as a desire is gratified, the indriyas shrink with satisfaction. This is the state of passive. So basically, mind and indriyas are one. Indriyas is a prolongation of the mind. The sea is fed by the rivers. The sea cannot exist without the rivers. Even so, the mind is fed by the indriyas and cannot exist without indriyas. So this is what is the short description given about indriyas. So how do you control the ear? Yes, so when you look at jnanendriyas, how do you control the ears? By hearing the glories, the leelas and kirtans of the Lord. That's what we are doing right now. We are hearing all about Bhagavan. So when you do that, then what happens? The ear sensation of ears comes under control. How do you control the sense of touch? By practicing brahmacharya. The other one is the feel. How do you control what you see? Because you're continuously seeing. 70% of the perception is seeing. You have to feel that every form is a form of the Lord. If you look at every form as a form of the Lord, then what happens? Then your eyes will, whenever it goes out to see anything, it will be seen as everybody as Bhagwan Swarupa. And then you have to obviously give up those articles which the mind likes most for a week or a month. So it's giving up something in your spiritual journey that you really love for a short period of time. Maybe you eat supari, maybe you sugar, maybe you salt, whatever it is. So give it up for some time. Eating chutneys, eating sauces, whatever it is, you should give it up for some time. Do fasting. On Ekadashi, do fasting. It's very good for the body. So then we've spoken about the organs of sensation. Let's look at the organs of action. Observe mauna. When you observe mauna, Bhagavan says, everybody should observe mauna, at least 2 hours in a day. Then what happens? And you should speak sweetly. You should speak the truth. Then what happens? You can control the organ of speech. So when you speak, you will only speak if it's absolutely necessary. Then How do you control the hand? Touch and feel, very important. Serve the sick and the poor. Serve your parents. When you've got parents, serve them. When you serve them, then what happens? You can serve the sadhus. Then what happens? Your touch and feel, your hands come under control. Then you have the restlessness of the legs. The legs are always restless. They want to go here and there. Go visit the temple. Visit the holy places of pilgrimage. We go to Tiruvannamalai. Go here. Go to Madurai. Go there. So then what happens? The legs are come under control. You do Girivalam around the Arunachala. Then you control the restlessness of the legs. Practice brahmacharya. Then you control the organ of generation. And then eat moderately. This is very important. In all our sadhana to eat moderately. You can control the excretion, the organ of excretion. So, if you really look at it, all the jnanendriyas and karmendriyas can be controlled, and by this what Bhagavan is trying to say in this verse is that just as the wild horses are broken in by whipping and stabling them, so also the unruly senses. These senses are all going out unruly. They're going outward. So among objects are lashed by the whip of discrimination. We have to do viveka and vairagya continuously. We should have both these buttons on all the time, so that showing that objects are unreal. So the subject is real and the objects are unreal and are tethered by the rope of pure intellect to the self, by the wise. Such is the truth. And that thou art. You are that Satchidananda Atman, and you have forgotten who you are, and you are going into these objects and thinking that they will give you happiness. But obviously those objects do not give us happiness. Because why? They are limited. See, we have the unlimited within, but we are trying to, our mind is limited, our senses are further limited, and the objects are even more limited. And we are trying to get these objects to give us happiness. They will never give us happiness. They will give us pleasure for some time or the other. So Bhagavan says the important thing here really is that we have to, like the horse, we have to use we have to tether them by the rope of pure intellect to the self by the wise. So what do? They use self-enquiry. Self-enquiry is one of the best ways to be able to keep the mind within. It will be happy also to be within, and it will be joyous. You will start experiencing great joy, and slowly you will experience bliss, and you will stop going out into the world of names and forms. Because why? When you use vairagya and viveka, you will realize they will give you only limited happiness. They will not give you unlimited happiness. And this third verse is saying, such is the truth that thou art. You are that. Tattvamasi. When somebody when the Guru tells you you are that, then what happens? We realize Aham Brahmasmi. If you are ripe enough, if you have done enough manana, and you have done a great amount of antarkarana shuddhi, then what happens? You will experience that self. You will experience the silence within. That's what we are. That's what this third verse of Guru Stuti tells us. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. We will now have the presentation of Devi Kalotara Jnana Vicharapadanam, Manana on it by Dr.Kalarani Rengasamy.
Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. அருணாச்சலமென அகமே நினைப்பவர் அகத்தை வேறறுப்பாய் அருணாச்சலம். Namo Ramana to all. With the abundance grace of Bhagavan, we are meditating on Devi Kalotra Jnana Vichara Padalam, very graciously given to us by Bhagavan in Tamil. And in the last satsang we saw Bhagavan explaining about Sunya. It is none other than the Paravastu. It is the self-illuminating thing. It is the being. It is from this sunya there appears the whole universe. When the sadhaka do dhyana of this sunya, his vasanas will get melted and become sunya itself, sunya alone. When there is no vasana, which is the cause for birth and death, the sadhaka will become free from birth and death. And in the next stanza, Bhagavan says, Devarum Deviyarum Anganame Anniyamam Pavam Aramum Tat Palangalum Mevidum Acharyam Acharya Jnanamume Anagivai Ma Samsaram Bandamar. Worshipping God, goddesses, fetch punya. And when one do himsa to the other jiva, it is pava, or we call it as a sin. Because of this sin, one gets sorrow. And because of the punya, one gets good deeds or happiness. They both give complete different phala. They are opposite different phala. But what happened? The phala or the fruit of this pava punya is not given immediately. It waits for the appropriate time. Till then, it needs a platform to stay. Likewise, there are so many vishayas which make a man wonder. Bhagavan says, thinking and wondering about these vishayas make one bonded or attached to the worldly happenings. This is called a big samsara, ma samsara. To come out of this state, one has to be calm, not thinking of anything, and this is the only way to come out of this bandha, or what we call the attachments. Because as we all know, any karma done with doership means the doer is assured of the phala or the fruit. He has to experience the fruit of his karma. There's no other go. Depending upon the desire of that person, if the fruit is not reaped according to his wishes, he feels very bad. The hatred, because of the hatred, he do unwanted and bad karmas, and again the circle repeats, the bad effect starts playing without fail. Bhagavan says, even if he does not want them, it will surely comes to him. That is why Bhagavan says, don't get involved in worldly happenings. Come out of it. Keep on instructing the mind to go to its source and be calm. In no way the happening are going to affect you. The mind should also listen to the instruction given by Buddhi spontaneously. I will tell you a small example. Once a merchant, after finishing his business, was traveling in a densely forest in the night. He wanted to take rest because he was very tired. So he went and sat under a big tree. He was so hungry also, but nothing was found nearby. But when he came round that big tree, he found a food packet on the other side of the tree. He got so excited and he was so anxious to see that what is inside that parcel. Very quickly he opened the parcel and there was delicious fresh sweets inside the parcel. He likes them so much and he was hungry also. So with great eagerness, he was about to eat them. He took one piece of a sweet, took it near his mouth and was about to eat. But a voice from somewhere came and it said, please don't eat that food. It is full of poison. If eaten, you will die. Immediately, he dropped the sweets down. Remember how much hungry he was. But when a voice came from somewhere, he doesn't know who is speaking also, but even though the voice came there, his buddhi instructed his mind not to eat it. Immediately it obeyed it because he know he will die. Never mind from where the voice came, because he don't want to take any risk. Likewise, why not one listen the Guru who keeps on saying worldly attachment or the vasanas is going to give you sorrow only. Why can't this thing which is taken into the buddhi, when instructed to the mind, obey it? They are in no way going to help us to realize the truth, to attain mukti. Let the mind listen to what buddhi says, what Guru says. In this stanza, also Bhagavan says, if we are wondering about the vasanas, the pala of Vishaya Jnana is going to make us a very big samsari, ma samsari. Tar palangalum mevidum acharyam. Acharya jnanamume ana ivai ma samsaram bandamal. The only way out to come out of this ma samsaram is to catch hold of the doer and destroy the doership, by which one can destroy the ahankara and always abide in the self. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. We will now have the sharing of Ramana Chatvarimshat by Sri Ujwal Jagadeesh.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Vairagyam tava vittamastu karunam shaknoshi hatum katam dushastestu samudyama pitripada dhyanam chakim tadrisham kamastestu vigarhito vinamatam rakshacha kim garhita skanda chagma manushya kim nu samayam kanche samudvikshase ramanaya loka gurave namah ramanaya loka gurave namah vairagya ninna nidiyagirali karuneya torevudu sariye nindisalal vagirali swayam yatnavu tande adi dhyana hagiralu sadyave kamavu tiraskarisalarhavu ಭಕ್ತರ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ತಿರಸ್ಕರಿಸಬಹುದೇ ಮನುಷ್ಯ ಚಗ್ಮಧರ ಸ್ಕಂದನೆ ಯಾವ ಸುಸಮಯಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾದಿರುವೆ ರಮಣನಿಗೆ ಲೋಕ ಗುರುವಿಗೆ ನಮನ ರಮಣನಿಗೆ ಲೋಕ ಗುರುವಿಗೆ ನಮನ. Ganapati Muni, in this verse of Ramana Chatvarimshat, is complaining to Bhagavan Ramana. He is telling, you may be a great Vairagi, you are a great person of great dispassion, but is it right on your part to give up compassion to your devotees? It may be blameworthy to do any work with effort, but for those devotees who are seeking your feet, you are our Father and they are seeking your feet. The devotees who seek your feet with effort, do you think even that effort is also blameworthy? Is it right? And the desires are said to be given up. The desires only bring sorrow. They have to be given up. But the desire to protect your devotees, is even that desire to think about the welfare of the devotees, to think about the good of the devotees, even that desire has to be given up? Is it right on your part? Oh, Skanda Chagma. Chagma is the one who is wearing a disguise of the human form. Oh, Skanda, who is wearing the disguise of the human form. Why are you waiting? Why are you wasting your time? Bhagavan Ramana also, in the prayer that he writes to Arunachala, he says, Maya Mayakamadai, the mountain which removes the Maya in a trice. This is Smaranat Arunachalam. And you just remember Arunachala, it gives liberation. Such a one you are, and why are you delaying your Karuna to my mother? Why are you not relieving her of all the disease of becoming and the disease of constant janana and marana, the cycle of birth and death? Why are you delaying it? Such is the prayer of a devotee, and Ganapati Muni only responds, is only talking on behalf of all the devotees. He is asking Ramana, why is this delay? Why don't you quickly come and show your all-enveloping compassion? Here, the third line says that the desire is something which has to be given up, because the desire is full of sorrow. We present one beautiful scene in one of our dance ballet, Arunachala Ramana Jnana Kandam, which has been dealt by Dr. Sarada too while meditating on the Labdha Vidyodayaya Namaha, or the Vidyas that he learned at Madurai. The one Vidya was that he had visited the Alagar Koil in Madurai with his relatives, and there he was served very, very sweet Pongal Prasadam. And after tasting that sweet Pongal Prasadam, there was a small desire in that little boy Venkatraman that this Pongal Prasadam is so tasty, I want little more. That was the desire, the little desire that the boy Venkatraman had. So the next time when they went to the Alagar Koil, the pujari who was known to the relative that had accompanied them, he gave a huge plate of prasadam with full of pongal, the sweet pongal, and that seeing that this young Venkatraman was nicely built and tall, so that pujari decided that this boy can carry it. So he gave that to that little boy, and Venkatraman had to carry that heavy plate filled with pongal all the way to his home, walking and keeping the plate on his head. And Ramana reports that his neck and back were paining and his head was paining very badly. And at that moment, and then he reached home, and after reaching home, nobody was ready to take part of that prasadam. So a huge quantity of prasadam, which was his part, he had to, with great difficulty, finish. And that moment, the boy Venkatraman realized all this difficulty of getting the pongal and to eat it. It is only because of my small desire that I had for more prasadam. So Ramana says one should have not have any desires, because the desire will only lead to problem. The desire of plenty, the problem of the plenty we have, something we have in plenty, that is also problem. When we have less, when we desire to have less, that is also problem. That may not fill one's stomach. So Ramana says that every desire is only a problem, has to be given up. But he is the compassionate one. He understands that we all have desires. Every thought is the manifestation of a desire. The desire to identify oneself with this body, to identify oneself with the intellect, the desire to identify ourselves with that image that we hold on to, that is the desire. So Ramana understands that the human mind is only made up of desires. So Ramana, with his great compassion, he says, in the methodology of teaching that we have learned, theatre arts for holistic development, the children should not be told what not to do, what not to do. You should say, don't stand, or don't sit, or don't do this, or don't do that. Okay. Instead, in the theatre arts for holistic development, in the theatre activities, what we do is we tell them what to do. Instead of simply sitting, we will tell them stand and dance. We will tell them, instead of moving here and there, we will say, come, let's sit. So the instruction is given to do something, and the instruction is not to stop them from doing something else. That naturally the behavior which is not desired but converts, and the desired behavior is built, is taught to the children through this methodology. In the same way, for Bhagavan Ramana, we are all children, and he is the great theatre arts for holistic development faculty who is teaching us. We all have desires. He does not say don't have desires. He say have a great desire, have a highest desire. That desire, when attained, you will not have any other desire. Have that desire. And in Ramana Gita he says, for the one who desires the highest, the duty, the only paramount duty that one needs to do is to know yourself. If you just want all these small pleasures of the world, then you can go ahead with that. But if you want the highest happiness, you want the highest desire, one who desires the highest, for such a one, to understand their own true nature is the paramount duty, says Bhagavan Ramana. And he says that whenever we have a desire, and our mind is always constantly thinking about that desire, I want this, I want this, I want this. And when the desire is fulfilled by the divine grace, what happens to that thought which is running in our mind? That thought of that desire, it subsides to its source. At that moment, when a desire is fulfilled, when that thought subsides it at its source, we get the taste, the mind tastes the sweetness of the self, which is our own true nature. But what we are wrongly understanding is that we are feeling happy, we are having this taste of joy only because the desires are fulfilled. But Ramana says, the happiness is your own true nature. What is obstructing it is the thought which is coming between you and your natural happiness. So Ramana says, turn back and understand your own true nature with the question, who am I? Then you will understand that you are that eternal bliss that you are seeking, and there is no need of any desire. To teach this truth, the Skanda, Muruga, had to come in the human form as Bhagavan Ramana. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. When this Skanda took the human form and came on this earth, Vishwanatha Swami gave 108 names to this Skanda, and this is being shared by Dr. Sarada, the Mananam on Ramana Ashtottara Shatanamavali.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self, manifest as Ramana, we are meditating on the 108 names, the litany on Bhagavan, composed by Vishwanatha Swami. And we are on the twin names, as it were. Om Pitrapadan Veshine Namaha, Pituradeshatah Shona Shailam Praptaya Namaha. We saw the journey of Bhagavan, and that journey, which is completely, there are many events which are happening in the journey. We see those events. We see Bhagavan first being scolded by his brother. for putting aside the exercise in Bain's English grammar and sitting down in meditation. We see Bhagavan hearing the call of Arunachala in these words of his elder brother, words similar to those he has heard many times after his enlightenment, when he has been absorbed in the self repeatedly. But this time, it is the call of Arunachala. We see him telling his elder brother that he has to attend a class, a special class. It is said in electricity, because of that current pulling him there. And then his brother tells him, take my college fees and pay it. So the money for the journey is provided by Arunachaleshwara. Bhagavan looks at an old atlas, finds that Tindivanam seems to be the nearest railway station to Tiruvannamalai, plans to buy a ticket there, leaves home with a note saying, this is, I have, in search of my father and in obedience to his command, set out on this journey, and this is embarking on a virtuous enterprise, so no money need to be spent on searching for this. That's all. And then he has not signed the note, and he has made a footnote saying, your college fees has not been paid. This letter, if we see the original Tamil, we can see that it's written in a great hurry. And it's very different from Bhagavan's later handwriting, which we see that Bhagavan's handwriting, which is preserved in Sri Ramanashramam in the archives and printed by Sri Ramanashramam in several books of Bhagavan, a very print-like handwriting, whether it is English or it is Tamil, and very, very, to use Bhagavan's phrase, unhurried. And that is the way Bhagavan would write later years. But this letter, there is no evenness in the letters of the words. They're all of various sizes, and it's huge, and it's in a big hurry that it has been written. So we saw that letter, the great letter of the turning point, the call of Arunachala, and Bhagavan setting out on the journey, not seeing that with the 3 rupees that he has taken, he can reach all the way to Tiruvannamalai, but buying a ticket to Tindivanam, leaving a little change with himself. And then during the journey, the Maulvi giving him the proper information, the proper route, that he has to get down at Vidupuram itself and take a train to Tiruvannamalai. And Bhagavan at Vidupuram, being hungry and waiting for his afternoon meal, the hotel keeper refusing to take any money from Bhagavan, and then Bhagavan buying a ticket to the next station, Mambalapattu, and walking from there. Walking all the way up to Ariyaninallur, reaching the temple there, seeing a bright light at the temple, and then after a while, when the temple is closing, asking if some food would be available. And then being told that no, he has to go to Kirur, a nearby temple, and walking with the priest to Kirur. And again being told over there that food will be given only to those who are working there or serving at the temple. After that, we find the beautiful anecdote of the drummer seeing the Shiva Tattva, seeing the glory, the effulgence of this young boy, and asking that his share of the food be given to the young Venkatraman, the Bhagavan. And Bhagavan taking this food, swoons, and everything is scattered on the road, but he picks up little bit from that, eats it, and goes to sleep on the veranda, in the veranda of Muthukrishna Bhagavatar, on the pail, or what we call in Kannada jagli, in Tamil we say thinnai. On that, Bhagavan spends the night, and morning he decides to knock on that very door. He knocks on the door, he's invited inside the house. The lady of the house believes that Sri Krishna himself has come to their house because it is the day, the sacred day of Gokula Ashtami. Bhagavan is fed the old food first, right away, so that he may not remain hungry. And then when the afternoon meal is cooked and ready, he is given the sumptuous meal of the festival day, and he is given money in exchange for his gold ruby earrings mortgaged by him. And finally, he is given a packet of sweets. With all this in his pocket, Bhagavan comes to the station and he buys the ticket to Tiruvannamalai, waiting for the train to come early in the morning, waiting in the station. And the train comes and Bhagavan boards it and arrives at Tiruvannamalai on the 1st of September 1896. So many events, such a, in a way, a difficult journey, but the problem being solved wherever the difficulty arises. Taking a ticket to a wrong place, but being told by a mysterious Maulvi what the correct route is. Not having money and needing to get food from somewhere, not getting food, but the drummer giving food. And the next day, Muthukrishna Bhagavatar and his wife feeding him twice over. Now, what is the Leela of Arunachaleshwara? One may wonder, why didn't he reveal to Bhagavan right away when he looked at the atlas itself? 3 rupees ticket to Tiruvannamalai. Some of us ask these questions. We may not ask these questions of Bhagavan's life, but we ask these questions of our own lives. Why didn't this happen? Why didn't this happen in this way? Why didn't it happen in a way that would be good for me? What I believe would be good for me. We keep asking these questions, but Bhagavan did not have any questions whatsoever. He didn't have any questions whatsoever. And he did not think of the negative, and he did not think of the positive also. He did think, Arunachaleshwara has provided me with the money for the journey. When the brother said, take the money, that thought did come to him. Again, when the hotel keeper said, you need not pay me, he thought, Arunachaleshwara has given me money for one more lap of the journey. But when he had to walk, he did not wonder, why did Arunachala not give me? He who has given me this much, why didn't he give me that little bit more also? By which I could have had the comfort of reaching. He didn't have any such thought. Whenever the grace was felt, he remembered Arunachala's specific grace. But at all other times, he was just lost in his love. He says he was like an iron filing being pulled by a magnet. Some huge current just pulled me, just brought me. So it was full of Arunachala and Arunachala alone. And there were all these happenings were happening somewhere on the surface when he was actually deep down, absorbed in the self. Somewhere on the surface, all this was happening, and he didn't question anything. From time to time, when hunger arose, he either bought something or asked for food when the money with him was completely exhausted. Before that, he did buy 2 fruits, 2 prickly pears, and then later there was no money, and he completely asked for food by begging for it. Asked people, "Can you give me food?" That's all. But there was no thought at all of the good and the bad. Bhagavan says later in his composition on Arunachala, Annamalai Adiyenai Anda Andre Aviyudal Kondai. The day you just governed me as Arunachala, you completely took over my body and my spirit. Yanakor kurayundo. Can I have any lack in my life? Is there any lacuna between my goal and my present joy? There is no. Kurayum gunamum niyallal. When you only are the good, when you only are the bad, enne nivatrai. I will not think about any of this. I do not think of any of this. And that is how we see the picture of Bhagavan in his journey, that beautiful, blissful love for Arunachala. Just enveloping him, just carrying him, bringing him towards itself, that Arunachaleshwara, who is also love, bringing him towards himself. That is all we see actually. We may narrate it as a series of events, but there is nothing there other than love for Arunachala. Anburu Arunachala. He says, you are the form of love, he says Bhagavan. But here we find Anburu Ramana, full of love, just love bursting forth. And Bhagavan reaches Arunachala on the 1st of September 1896. It is a Tuesday. Sadhuam Swami calls it Inbakkiramai. That day of the week which is full of bliss. Inbakkiramai. So much of bliss, because Bhagavan's arrival at Tiruvannamalai is to disseminate bliss, is to share bliss with everyone. So that day, very day of the week, every week itself, says Sadhu Swami, is full of bliss. Ramanananda it is. And Bhagavan arrived at Tiruvannamalai on Tuesday, the 1st of September, and he was to go directly to Arunachaleshwara temple. That is what many of the devotees have recorded. But some others record that he did not know the way to the Arunachaleshwara temple, and hence he wandered about a bit here and there in the town before he realized how to go to the temple. But the point is that once he was there at the doorstep, all the doors were open. Bhagavan arrived at 12 noon. The doors were open and there was nobody there. That was a miracle. If the doors are open, you should expect people will be there. The doors were open and people were not there. No one was there. And Bhagavan went to Arunachaleshwara, embraced him and said, Father, I have come. Pituradeshata Shona Shailam Praptahayan. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri.
நமோ ரமணா. பெயர் நினைத்திடவே பிடித்திழுத்தனை. Bhagavan has written this in his Aksharamanamalai. Just thinking of his name, he just pulls us within like that. He also went to Arunachala. Saying so, we will continue to chant some more verses of Aksharamanamalai. which will be chanted by Srimati V.Radha and Vallabh.
Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala. கோடியால் மயக்கியன் போதத்தை பறித்து உன் போதத்தை காட்டினை அருணாச்சலா. போக்கும் வரவுமில் பொது வெளியினருள் போராட்டம் காட்டருணாச்சலாம். பௌதிகமாமுடல் பற்று அற்று நாடும் முன் பவிசு கண்டூர அருள் அருணாச்சலா. மலை மருந்திட நீ மலை திடவோ அருள் மலை மருந்தாயோடு அருணாச்சலாம். மானம் கொண்டுருபவர் மானத்தை அழித்த விமானம் இல்லாதோடில் அருணாச்சலம். மிஞ்சிடில் கெஞ்சிடும் கொஞ்ச வரிவனியன் வஞ்சியாதருள் என்னை அருணாச்சலம். மிகாமல் இல்லாமல் மாற்றலை கலமாகாமல் காத்தருள் அருணாச்சலா. முடியடி காணா முடிவிடுத்தனை நேர் முடிவிட கடனிலை அருணாச்சலாம். மூக்கிலின் முக்காட்டு முகுரமாகாதனை தூக்கி அணைந்தருள் அருணாச்சலாம். மெய்யகத்தின் மனமின் மலரணையில் நம்மை கலந்திட அருணாச்சலாம். மேல் மேல் தாழ்ந்திடு மெல்லிய சேர்ந்து நீ மேன்மையுற்றனையன் அருணாச்சலா. மைமய நீத்தருள் மையினால் உனது உண்மை வசமாக்கினை அருணாச்சலாம். அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலாம். அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலாம். அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலாம். அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலாம். அருணாச்சலம் வாழி நண்பர்களும் வாழி. அக்ஷரமணமாலை வாழி. நமோ ரமண.
Namo Ramana. Conclude today's satsang with the Ashtottara puja done by Sri Dileep Simha at his altar. The chanting of Ashtottara will be done by Sri Vaibhavji, Prarthana and Revathi Shankar.
नमो रमण. भारद्वाज विश्वनाथ विरचितं श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तर शतनामावलिः अपार सच्चित् सुखवारिराशेर् यस्योर्विमात्रं भुवनं समस्तं गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि. ॐ महासेन महोंशेन जाताय नमः. ॐ श्रीरमणाय नमः. ॐ गुरवे नमः. ॐ अखण्डसंविदाकाराय नमः. ॐ महौजसे नमः. ॐ कारणोद्भवाय नमः. ॐ जगद्हितावताराय नमः. ॐ श्रीभूमिनाथस्थलोस्थिताय नमः. ॐ पराशरकुलोत्तंसाय नमः. ॐ सुन्दरार्यतपःफलाय नमः. ॐ कमनीयसुचारित्राय नमः. ॐ सहायाम्बा सहायवते नमः. ॐ शोणाचलमहोलीनमानसाय नमः. ॐ स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमः. ॐ श्रीमद्द्वादशान्तमहास्थले लब्धविद्योदयाय नमः. ॐ महाशक्तिनिपातेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः। ॐ परमार्थविदे नमः। ॐ तीव्राय नमः। ॐ पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः। ॐ इन्दुमौलिना पितृमते नमः। ॐ पितुरादेशतः शोणशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः। ॐ तपोमयाय नमः। ॐ उदासीनाय नमः। ॐ महायोगिने नमः। ॐ महोत्साहाय नमः। ॐ कुशाग्रधिये नमः। ॐ शान्तसङ्कल्पसंरम्भाय नमः। ॐ सुसन्दृशे नमः। ॐ सवित्रे नमः। ॐ स्थिराय नमः। ॐ तपक्षपितसर्वाङ्गाय नमः। ॐ फुल्लाम्बुजविलोचनाय नमः। ॐ चन्द्रिकासितहासश्रीमण्डिताननमण्डलाय नमः। ॐ चूतवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः। ॐ चूणिताखिलविभ्रमाय नमः। ॐ वेदवेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञाय नमः। ॐ चिन्मुद्रिणे नमः। ॐ त्रिगुणातिगाय नमः। ॐ विरूपाक्षगुहावासाय नमः। ॐ विराजदचलाकृतये नमः। ॐ उद्दीप्तनयनाय नमः। ॐ पूर्णाय नमः। ॐ रचिताचलताण्डवाय नमः। ॐ गम्भीराय नमः। ॐ परमाचार्याय नमः। ॐ सुप्रसन्नाय नमः। ॐ अभयप्रदाय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणास्य निभाय नमः। ॐ धीराय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः। ॐ स्वराजे नमः। ॐ महर्षये नमः। ॐ भगवते नमः। ॐ ईड्याय नमः।
ॐ भूमविद्याविशारदाय नमः। ॐ विमलाय नमः। ॐ दीर्घदर्शिने नमः। ॐ आप्ताय नमः। ॐ ऋजुमार्गप्रदर्शकाय नमः। ॐ समदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्यदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्याय नमः। ॐ प्रशान्ताय नमः। ॐ अमितविक्रमाय नमः। ॐ सुकुमाराय नमः। ॐ सदानन्दाय नमः। ॐ मृदुभाषिणे नमः। ॐ दयार्णवाय नमः। ॐ श्रीशोणाचलहृद्भूतस्कन्दाश्रमनिकेतनाय नमः। ॐ सद्दर्शनोपदेष्ट्रे नमः। ॐ सद्भक्तवृन्दपरिवृताय नमः। ॐ गणेशमुनिभृङ्गेन सेविताङ्घ्रिसरोरुहाय नमः। ॐ गीतोपदेशसारादिग्रन्थसञ्चिन्नसंशयाय नमः। ॐ वर्णाश्रममतातीताय नमः। ॐ रसज्ञाय नमः। ॐ सौम्याय नमः। ॐ आत्मवते नमः। ॐ सर्वावनिमतस्थानामाराध्याय नमः। ॐ सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः। ॐ आत्मारामाय नमः। ॐ महाभागाय नमः। ॐ मातृमुक्तिविदायकाय नमः। ॐ विनताय नमः। ॐ विप्राय नमः। ॐ मुनीन्द्राय नमः। ॐ पावकोज्ज्वलाय नमः। ॐ दर्शनादघसंहारिणे नमः। ॐ मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः। ॐ हृच्छान्तिकरसान्निध्याय नमः। ॐ स्मरणाद्बन्धमोचकाय नमः। ॐ अन्तस्तिमिरचण्डांशवे नमः। ॐ संसारार्णवतारकाय नमः। ॐ शोणाद्रीशस्तुतिद्रष्ट्रे नमः। ॐ हार्दविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः। ॐ अविच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः। ॐ नैसर्गिकमहातपसे नमः। ॐ कमण्डलुधराय नमः। ॐ शुभ्रकौपीनवसनाय नमः। ॐ गुहाय नमः। ॐ दण्डपाणये नमः। ॐ कृपापूर्णाय नमः। ॐ भवरोगभिषग्वराय नमः। ॐ स्कन्दाय नमः। ॐ देवतमाय नमः। ॐ अमर्त्याय नमः। ॐ सेनान्ये नमः। ॐ पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ॐ श्रीरमणभगवते नमः। श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तरशतनामपूजां समर्पयामि। यः स्थाणोररुणाचलस्य पदयोः स्मृत्या जनिं प्राप्य तत् दिव्यानुग्रहसुप्रवाहविवशस्तादात्म्यभावं गतः हृन्निष्ठस्वगभीरनित्यतपसा लोकान् पुनास्येकराट् तस्मै श्रीरमणाय ते नम इदं लोकोत्तरज्योतिषे। नमो 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 रमण सदाशिवप्रभावरण नमो महर्षि। नमो महर्षि दर्शनसुखमङ्गलमुखसकलजीवहितसम्मुख ब्रह्मसङ्गिये सदा तुष्ट सदा हृष्ट सदा शिवानन्दपुष्ट परममहर्षि ब्रह्मनिष्ठ समदर्शी नमो 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 रमण सदाशिवप्रभावर नमो महर्षि। नमो महर्षि ನಮ್ಮ ಮನವದೊಂದು ಕಾಡು ನೀನರಿತಿಹೆ ಅದರ ಜಾಡ್ ಹಿತವನರಿತು ನೀಡುತ್ತೆಮ್ಮ ಕೊರೆಯ ತಣಿಸಲೈ ಬೇಡಲೆಂದು ಬಂದ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿಯೇ ತಣಿವೆವೈ ಮೋಡಿಗಾರನೇ ಹಿತವ ನುಡಿದು ಪೊರೆ ನಮ್ಮನು ಬ್ರಹ್ಮ ಸಂಘಿಯೇ ನಮೋ 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 ರಮಣ ಸದಾಶಿವ ಪ್ರಭಾವರಣ ನಮೋ ಮಹರ್ಷಿ ನಮೋ ಮಹರ್ಷಿ ನಮೋ 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 ರಮಣ ಸದಾಶಿವ ಪ್ರಭಾವರಣ ನಮೋ ಮಹರ್ಷಿ ನಮೋ ಮಹರ್ಷಿ। बोलो भगवान श्री रमण महर्षि की जय।
Yeah.